Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very tall corporate leader, a very senior and respected banking leader from Bangalore, Miss Manimekhalai. Mani, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Um, Mani is the former managing director and chief executive officer of the Union Bank of India, which is the fourth largest public sector bank in India by market capitalization. So, ma'am, I was so fascinated to read the amazing story you have had to reach the very apex of such a large bank. Tell me what first attracted you to banking as a profession?
So I can tell you one thing that, banking as a profession, honestly, when we joined the banking sector, it is nothing like, that was an opportunity that came to us. And like all young professionals, all of us are looking for an opportunity to build a meaningful career, to become financially independent and contribute to society. I can tell you one small thing that the banking has direct, actually has that direct connect with people's life.
Hmm.
Every banker you can see is not merely handling money. A banker is actually helping someone or their aspirations to build a first home, start a business, probably educate a child, and
Correct.
overcome probably a difficult phase in someone's life. So
Hmm.
what actually is you can say banking is, it sits on the intersection of somebody's aspiration and the opportunity that lies for a banking.
Hmm.
So that's what really attracted me to banking.
Great response. And tell me, what were some of the most important lessons you learned during your 3 decades at Vijaya Bank that shaped your leadership philosophy?
I can tell you that Vijaya Bank was a great bank, and we had the privilege, like I had, of course, the privilege to work across different geography, functions, responsibility, meet a lot of people because it
Hmm.
was a mid-sized bank. So, we were groomed in all areas of banking. Those years taught me lessons that no classroom could ever teach us. The first lesson I learned from the bank was because it was started by a group of farmers in the coastal Mangalore. Was the first lesson that you learn is about humility, and the branch is the greatest management school in the world. When you sit across a farmer, a small
Hmm.
business, a
Yeah.
teacher, or a first time borrower, you quickly realize that every number has a human story behind it. And the second most important lesson, so there must be many lessons, but I will only tell you about two or
Yeah.
three of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And the second, of course, the trust is, that is the real currency of banking. Technology will change, products will change, regulation will come and go, but trust remains a constant episode in a banker. And
Very.
a third most important lesson was, sir, authority and leadership. About authority and leadership. Leadership is not about authorities; it is
Hmm.
about responsibility.
Correct.
Some of the finest leaders that you meet in your career, they don't come with designations. They come with they are consistently looking at the institution rather than themselves or a small department that they are heading. So
Hmm.
looking back, I often say that I often believe that also, that Vijaya Bank just did not give me a career, it gave me a foundation, and it taught me to be disciplined, and the journey shaped my that particular journey shaped my leadership role that followed later.
Absolutely fascinating. Great response. And tell me, what personal values have remained constant throughout your professional journey as a banker?
So I already told you, if I had to identify a few values that
Hmm.
has shaped my career or has been constant throughout my journey, the
Hmm.
first would always emerge as integrity. No,
Hmm.
it sounds like a simple word, and but it becomes truly meaningful when you have to make decisions during difficult times.
Correct.
It is easy to do the right thing when circumstances are comfortable and everything around you is hunky dory, but integrity's real test comes when there is pressure, uncertainty, and conflicting interest. The
Hmm.
second value, of course, is accountability. Throughout my career, I believe that leadership is not about claiming your success. It is owning that responsibility. When things go well, the
Hmm.
credit should go to the team, and when challenges arise, leaders must step forward and take the blame for it.
Very
And
interesting.
the third value is the respect for people, or nearly, because in a public sector bank you also meet a 5 rupee customer and a 500 crore customer. So
Correct.
you have to give them the same kind of level playing field. You have to respect people for what they are, what they're doing for you. And then you have lived and worked with a lot of employees, so all those things give you the understanding that people are important to you.
Very well.
And I always believe that uh, these are the three things that mostly and defines your character, and you have to continuously learn. And that's what I will say, sir. These are the values that I stood
Very
with,
well said.
and I've always been on that path.
Absolutely.
Integrity, accountability, believe in people, and learning, of course. These are
Very
the
well.
things that defines a person actually.
Absolutely. You have worked through multiple banking transformations and mergers. How did each transition prepare you for the MD and CEO role?
So I should tell you here that, of course, I moved from Vijaya Bank to Canara Bank and then to Union Bank of India. Every transition in my career taught me something different,
Hmm.
and each one prepared me for the next level of responsibility. One of the biggest lessons I learned in that transformation is never that never about systems alone. It is always about people.
Hmm.
If people are with you, then the systems work on their own. When organizations go through mergers of that big scale, like what I saw in Union Bank of India, and what I saw in even in Canara Bank, or even when the merger in of Vijaya Bank with BOB, it is not an operational integration. It is actually an emotional integration.
Hmm.
People worry about their futures. Teams wonder where they will fit. Cultures need to align. And, of course, trust needs to be rebuilt. So
Hmm.
these are the things that, you should come through communication, through, clarity of the purpose, patience, and all these things. When I assumed the role of MD and CEO, really helped me to have multiple perspectives. And then I had also had a lot of experience in branch operations, credit, recovery, business,
Hmm.
human resources. All this gave me a good fundamental push towards the major role that I was to play as
Absolutely.
an MD and CEO of Union Bank of India.
Absolutely. And therefore, when you became MD and CEO of Union Bank in 2022, what were the three priorities you identified immediately?
So, as the MD of Union Bank of India, let me tell you, sir, that uh, I had, my the government had given me the FSIB had conducted the interview, and they had come out with the results in March 16, 2022, and I took up the reins of the bank in somewhere in June 2022. So I had sufficient time to understand what Union Bank was about,
Yeah.
understand what I should be doing, and I knew that the bank had already gone through a significant transformation journey following the merger of Andhra Bank and Corporation Bank with Union Bank. My first priority was, of course, to strengthening profitability,
Hmm.
and that too in a very sustainable manner.
Yeah.
Profitability is important, but sustaining profitability is even more important.
Correct.
I wanted growth, but that was supported by strong fundamentals and disciplined risk management. And you should have operational efficiency for that. And
Hmm.
the second priority was improving asset quality. And asset quality is the you can say the foundation of banking.
Yeah.
If asset quality weakens, every other achievement becomes vulnerable.
Yeah.
So we focused in the bank. We focused on monitoring, resolution, recovery,
Mm.
and the most important is the credit discipline
Mm.
across the organization. And the third priority was, if I can recount, was the building confidence across the stakeholders,
Mm.
whether it be customers, employees,
Yeah.
investors, regulators, all every stakeholder should feel confident about the
Correct.
institution.
Correct.
And
Correct.
only then the institution can go forward and step forward, and acceleration will happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have to, like what you say, that people have to be aligned towards a common purpose, and only then they can move forward. And looking back, if I can say, my years of the priorities that I took were, was one of discipline and a focused execution, which of course the outcomes that followed were that
Very interesting.
reflection of the collective efforts of all the unionites rather than one single person sitting there at the helm of affairs.
Absolutely. Very well said. You mentioned that your first priority was profit, and you grew the profit of Union Bank from 5,200 crores to nearly 18,000 crores during your
Yes, sir.
tenure.
Yes, sir.
What were some of the specific actions that drove this dramatic improvement?
So many of times people have asked me this question, and I have, they feel that it was a magic or a secret behind what is there. There's
Hmm.
no secret, but only I can tell you that, it was not a single small
Hmm.
decision that I had taken, or it was a transformation overnight.
Hmm.
And many of my stakeholders, whether it be the government or the regulators, the Reserve Bank of India,
Hmm.
all have helped me to really come out with this transformation.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
improvement was results of hundreds of discipline decisions that we consistently took over a period of time.
Hmm.
As I already mentioned to you, asset quality was one big improvement that we have made.
Yeah. Hmm.
A healthier balance sheet, of course, creates a stronger foundation for growth, and that was one thing. And second driver was the credit discipline. We
Hmm.
focused on quality growth rather than growth at any cost.
Hmm.
So this is what I've been always telling. Let's not look at any kind of a growth just because we want a growth, but we have to see that every growth contributes to the bank's bottom line.
Right.
That was my long, and that will only allow the balance sheet to grow in a sustainable manner.
Correct.
And the third driver, of course, was the operational efficiency. We improved digital adoption, we improved technology, and all this, of course, was it impacted the profitability in a very strong manner.
Very interesting.
And the last but not the least that I can tell is the people who were aligned with the goals of the bank,
Hmm.
and that's a reason, sir, that we could do what we had to do in the bank.
Fascinating. The second priority you spoke of was asset quality. And under your leadership, the asset quality improved with an NPA reducing from 11% to 3.6%. What were some of the most critical interventions that made this possible?
So, as I've already mentioned, asset quality improvement is never the result of a single initiative.
Yes.
It requires, a lot of discipline, consistency, and the willingness to address the difficult issues head on.
Hmm.
You cannot say, okay, you throw it back and say, okay, this is fine. And but there were a lot of such, consistent willingness that we were able to do. And the government also stepped in many of the times.
Hmm.
Constantly, the DFS were always, urging banks to reduce NPA. You must have seen how MAM also, FM
Hmm.
MAM has also been talking about this, how, discipline has bought this. It begins, like with credit appraisal,
Yeah.
monitoring, and risk management. That's what the first thing that comes to my mind.
Hmm.
See, if you do your, the basics correctly, then everything is okay. When your appraisal itself is wrong, then there's nothing, no stopping in
Correct.
the account becoming an NPA.
Correct. Correct.
And then you have to strengthen the monitoring mechanism, focus on the early warning signal, and ensure that potential stress is identified at the very beginning before it hits your balance sheet. You tell that yes, the problem is occurring, and you try and put a stop to that. So monitoring is very important. And the third, of course, is recovery and the resolution. So my team worked really tirelessly across the country to engage with borrowers, engage with the courts, engage with the NCLT forums. Everywhere we, and find out a practical solution wherever it is possible.
Hmm.
And of course, the last one is accountability. Each one of us have to be accountable for what. It's not just a department which is responsible for the asset quality. It's a shared responsibility of the institution.
Yeah.
The credit, the department, the monitoring department, the resolution department, everyone should be on the same page. Only
Correct.
then, sir, we can find that things can change. And this is what has happened. And we have demonstrated what has happened here only. And of course, on top of that, all these things sits governance and risk management, and that is important to
Absolutely.
the in the risk framework and
Hmm.
the governance framework, how these are executed together, that only will align to the goals that the bank has got, sir.
Amazing. One more question relating to the bank's performance, and then we'll come to some other questions. The bank's business expanded, ma'am, by over 5 lakh crores.
Yes, sir.
5 lakh crores, for my viewers and listeners who are not in India, is over $500 billion.
Yes, sir.
What were the key strategic decisions behind this growth?
As I've always been telling, sir, it is, like sustainability is what it comes
Correct.
to my mind.
Correct.
The growth becomes meaningful only when it is balanced and it is sustainable.
Right.
If you just pursue growth simply for the sake of larger numbers, it's not going to help anything. We
Correct.
focused on building a diversified and a resilient, you can say, a business franchise,
Mm.
like retail banking. It was a very good growth engine for us. Agriculture, MSME, and MSME is the backbone of India's economy. So
Correct.
we all strengthened all these things through our corporate banking relationship. Though we had, if you're looking at what the bank had, we always said 55% of your portfolio should be retail and RAM portfolio, that is, and remaining should be the credit, larger bank, corporate banking. So
Mm.
we tried and took the corporate relationship also. We tried to maintain a very disciplined risk framework in that. At
Mm.
the same time, we invested heavily in the customer experience and digital capabilities, and that also increased, the business. One thing I've learned is that the customer do not think in terms of banking products; they think in terms of solutions. When institutions focus on solving the customer's needs effectively, growth follows
Correct.
naturally.
Correct.
So that is what I feel, sir, was is secret behind that tremendous growth in my business.
Very well said. You also spoke a few minutes back about technology and digital transformation. And I think you led the Vyom platform,
Yes, sir.
which now serves millions of customers.
Yes, sir.
What was the vision behind creating such a strong digital ecosystem in the bank?
So, when you say that technology is very important, I have also said, see, technology is only uh, what do you call enabler, and it is the people who have to really align with those things. So what Yom's philosophy was simple. We wanted to create a single integrated digital ecosystem that would meet a customer's banking needs at one end and the banking needs on the other end. So there should be a seamless integration of the customer's what he wants and the technology.
Mm.
So today's customer, expect convenience. They
Mm.
do not want multiple applications, complicated processes, and a fragmented experience. So anywhere he goes, he has a different experience. So Yom we designed to bring together, simple things like accessibility, innovation, where the customer, feels happy about adopting it. And that I feel was ultimately what Yom could give and build relationship across the customers and the various stakeholders of the
Hmm.
bank, sir.
Hmm. With over 73,000 employees, and the fact that you had two new banks which were merged into Union Bank, what changes did you make to culture, talent development, and employee engagement during your tenure?
So that's a very fascinating question, actually, and close to my heart too. So large institutions, succeed when people feel connected to a common purpose.
Correct.
And you have seen any edifice is built on people, and if there is a common motto, common purpose, and that's how organizations grow. We have seen how Southwest Airlines, all those things, how did they grow? It is because people felt this is my institution, this is where this is my purpose, and these are my goals.
Hmm.
When that ownership comes in, naturally everything changes. So one of my first priorities was, creating an environment where employees felt valued, heard, and empowered. So if you have ever come to my bank when I was, whether I was a ED or the MD of the bank, I always kept my doors open.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody could walk in and give their two-piece, and whatever they wanted to tell me, they could tell. We focused, that was one thing that I did. We focused on learning and development also.
Hmm.
We bought out so many things, but digital capability, leadership development, wellness initiatives, so all this brought out greater engagement across the levels.
Hmm.
I have always believed that culture should not be imposed from the top. It must be an experience that the organization should feel. The moment a culture is imposed,
Hmm.
nothing happens actually. One day the DNA will break. But what you have to do is take little steps to change the DNA of organization.
Right.
When the employees feel respected and invested in, they contribute, beyond their job description,
Correct.
and that energy becomes visible in customer experience.
Well
And the
said.
front desk is where you really feel that yes, people have changed, people have really understood what the bank is, and they all contribute to the institutional success, sir.
Hmm. Very interesting. Next question, a few questions are for you. As one of India's most accomplished women banking leaders, what unique challenges did you face in your journey to the top?
So I can tell you that I actually have not taken that as a challenge.
Mm,
Like you cannot say that uh, leadership in every profession or leadership journey comes with challenges, regardless of gender.
mm,
So rather than viewing a challenge as a barrier, I can say that I approached the opportunity to. It was like an opportunity to learn, perform, and grow.
mm,
Throughout my career, I have remained focused on competence
mm.
and delivering results.
Yeah.
And I told you in the very beginning, integrity was something that I did not let go at all in my career. So,
Mm,
becoming the first woman MD of CEO or MD and CEO of Union Bank of India, and at that time, the only woman heading a public sector bank was both, like more a responsibility than a privilege.
correct.
It reinforced my belief that leadership is defined not by gender alone,
Absolutely.
but performance and the ability to inspire others.
Mm,
So that remained constantly with me, and that is how I've seen myself, and that is how I've got to that level, sir.
mm. But Mani, I've spoken to many, many women leaders around the world, and often asked them the same question that I'm going to ask you. Did you ever feel that you had to work harder than your male counterparts to prove yourself?
So that's a difficult question to answer. But see, as I told you in the previous answer also, that the focus was always on doing a job to the best of your ability rather than comparing your journey with someone else. The
Correct.
comparisons will always come, sir, but then you have to do what is you feel is your ability. Am I giving 100% to my job? By while leadership journeys are it differs from people to people. I believe that sustained performance and commitment ultimately earns respect and recognition. My focus has always been on contributing meaningfully to the institutions that or the departments I serve, rather than thinking of what others are doing, what have they done, should I work harder than them? No, that was not my goal at all.
Right.
Give you 100%, see that the result is achieved, and stay focused on whatever you're doing, and
Mm.
that's what will contribute meaningfully, sir.
Great response. Time for two more questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Uh, what practical steps can organizations which are so large like Bank of India, Union Bank of India, take to create more women leaders at senior levels?
So the first and foremost thing that we have to ask is, like tokenism. Whether we are just, we're saying 33% or 25% or 16%. So like Union Bank of India had about almost 30% women in the roles. The conversation should be more on opportunity rather than on representations. So, what we have to create at the ground level is organizations need strong mentorship programs, leadership development pathways, actually,
Mm.
and a flexible support system.
Mm.
Most important is an unbiased talent evaluation processes. Most importantly, women must be given meaningful opportunities to critical assignments. So this is what happens when a woman feels, you know, truly respected, and that she's been given this kind of a critical assignment. Her motivation actually grows. And as we've seen in my bank, in Vijaya Bank, that when I started, I was given these kind of roles.
Mm.
So that developed that kind of a instinct in me that, I'm capable of doing
Yeah.
something. I'm better. So this capability will, build and, the experience, and this develops the experience and also observe.
Very nice.
And one thing all of us should understand, that having more women leaders is not only a diversity objective, it's a big business objective.
Absolutely right.
Because diverse leadership teams make stronger decisions and
Correct.
build stronger institutions.
Correct.
And so I can say that you should have a proper ecosystem. You should foster merit based growth, and create a leadership pipeline. Only then I can say that organizations can unlock the full potential of a diverse talent, sir.
Mm.
And this is what we have been doing in Union Bank of India. We bought out a lot of leadership programs of women, empower her. That is something that we bought out, and where we have been given different lessons. I bought many women leaders from the industry to talk to them. So a
Mm.
lot of things that we did, it cannot be counted, but lot many little things we did, so that we can unlock the full potential of the women talent in the
Very
bank, sir.
nice. Very nice. And I completely agree. I mean, I worked with so many women across in my career. I've just found work ethics, and I've said this many times, work ethics of women leaders is significantly better.
Great, sir.
But coming to my last question, and this is back to you again. If you could go back and give advice to the young woman who joined Vijaya Bank in 1988, what would you tell her?
So I would probably tell her to worry less,
Okay.
worry less, and
Yeah,
trust the journey more. When
absolutely.
we are young, sir, we often feel the
We all
pressure to have
we,
everything figured out immediately. Like we are impatient. We compare ourselves with others. We worry more on the timelines. We wonder where we are progressing, whether we are progressing at all.
yes.
So I would rather say that keep learning, stay curious, protect your integrity, and treat people with respect. And I think all the other things will follow. And consistency is one thing that will come. These are the things I would say to myself.
Mm, very
Protecting
interesting.
your integrity and treating people
Absolutely.
with respect. That's
Absolutely.
very, very important, sir,
And these
to
are very,
anybody.
very powerful words. But on
Yes,
that note, I just want to say first, congratulations on the incredible success you had while leading Union Bank of India, and in an amazing career that you've had since you started in 1988. Your journey has been so fascinating. For my viewers and listeners, it's almost like a case study in
Yes.
management of how you built Union Bank of India and how clearly you have articulated your own values, your priorities for the bank. And, for to achieve such incredible numbers, I was fascinated to hear you saying that you've drilled it down to just three simple priorities, which seem very easy, but I can only imagine how hard the work must have been to have achieved all these amazing results. Thank you so much for speaking to me and
Thank
all
you
the
very
best.
much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.